Taylor McHargue, ESPN with us every Thursday at 4:30. Craig Smoak and Paul Catalina. I'm David Smoak. Garrett Ross running the mothership. And Taylor, thank you for your time. So what are your thoughts, Taylor, as we look ahead? Two teams in the Big 12 took it on the noggin, and one of them was stunning, the loss by Baylor to Texas State. And then also Tech goes up to Wyoming up 17-0. They blow a gasket and lose that game. Does that take away any of these games between Oregon and also Utah coming into the state of Texas?
Well, I certainly think that it takes some of the steam out of expectations for the season. There's no doubt. And I'll throw TCU, or you mentioned TCU, I'll throw you had Baylor, you had TCU, you had Tech. I mean, it was for that portion of the Big 12, it was a tough week one. But I think goals are still intact. Outside of likely making a run like TCU did last year to get to the college football playoff, goals are still intact, certainly from a conference championship standpoint for a New Year's Six. Those are all still out there. I thought, I watched, we were back, our game was over on Saturday. We were back at the hotel watching. I got every snap in of that Baylor-Texas State game. And I think I was most surprised really there just up front. I thought Texas State up front was winning in the trenches, and that was something that really surprised me against Baylor. I did not see that coming. Texas Tech, that is a tough place to play. Going to Laramie, Wyoming, I think that was their sixth straight home opener in Wyoming that they have won. Jumping out to the lead that they did, I actually felt like if there was a team that I would expect to bounce back in a big way where they would now be in a position to upset, that would be Texas Tech to me. It wouldn't shock me if they got a win over Oregon, just because I still think that's a really talented team. And they just sputtered so much in the second quarter, and then momentum built for Wyoming. But to your original point, yeah, it was a disappointing week for the Big 12 overall, I felt like, in week one.
Taylor, has your opinion changed greatly about Colorado after week one, or do you still, while it probably has changed maybe a little bit, is it still wait and see a little bit?
I think we have to measure expectations for everybody after week one, and that's both good and bad. There's so much knee-jerk reaction, and in this transfer portal era, we just don't know with a lot of these teams until they get out there. And some of these rosters, they've got north of 50 guys. Colorado has more than 80 new guys on their roster. Do I think they deserve to be getting some of the top 10 votes that they're getting? No, absolutely not. But are they one of the worst Power 5 teams in college football? Clearly not. So it's somewhere in the middle. I think, they're playing Nebraska this week. Nebraska looked not great on offense against Minnesota, and it's just a field goal difference. So I think we need to measure our expectations. Colorado, though, to me, the biggest thing that jumped out, that staff that Deion has brought in, we knew that, or at least I think we all expected, that he would get them up to speed. I don't think any of us expected it to be that fast. And I've got TCU this week, so I've watched that tape now a handful of times. And Colorado just being as sound as they were and playing good assignment football, that's what surprised me most. Because I think we expected the staff that Deion compiled to be a solid staff in college football. But you bring in more than 80 guys that are new on the roster. That's so difficult to do, to get kids up to speed in your system. And then the last piece, Deion clearly, or Coach Prime, I guess I should say, clearly has them playing with a lot of juice and emotion and energy. And that, to me, was the biggest difference in that game. They just looked like the team that wanted it more between TCU and Colorado.
What did you think in watching the Frogs of just the concerns that they have moving forward? I mean, that's a game, as you know, that, hey, Chandler Morris throws only one pick in the red zone, and it's a 3-point game in the end. They still had their opportunities to win, but the defense not looking great. Morris with a couple of bad mistakes, and obviously Taylor, they lost so much talent, but it is the transfer portal era, and they went pretty heavy on that. But what did you just kind of dissect from them, and what concerns you or not moving forward?
Well, I would say it's two parts. The first is they did lose a lot of talent, but they have a lot of talent coming back. There's still, if you go look at the Reese's Senior Bowl watch list, there's 14 guys on that list that are on TCU's roster right now. So there's still a bunch of dudes that they have playing for them in Fort Worth. The second piece, what I would say is most concerning right now, but that I think they could get fixed really quickly, is the lack of discipline on the defensive side of the ball. You had guys just completely blowing assignments left and right in this game. And the big one that jumped out to me was TCU just decided For whatever reason, they weren't going to cover the running back on the backfield in the passing game. Their running back, Colorado's running backs, now some of this was skewed because there was a long screen pass for a touchdown, but they had well over 100 yards receiving just out of the backfield. And that's stuff that just can't happen. And I don't mean guys getting beat. I mean the running back releases and no one goes with him. And it happened consistently. So those are the things that you just wonder, man, for a team that they do have several veterans that came back, it just didn't look like that, especially on the back end. The secondary, I thought, played really poorly for TCU. Now, they're going to get an opportunity this week in a get-right game. We've got them against Nichols this week, an FCS team coming out of the Southland Conference. But they're going to be a huge favorite in this game, like they should be. They should win convincingly. But if they don't, if they look slow or sluggish at all, I think that's where you're going to start to see real concern. Now, I don't expect that. And I think they have a chance to get back on track. They've got a game after that against SMU. Like I said at the beginning, all the goals for them in terms of conference play in a New Year's Six Bowl, that's all still there. But they need to show it, especially to me, on the defensive side of the ball.
Taylor, do you think we're seeing a sea change in the ACC right now, not just with Florida State's huge statement win over LSU, but Clemson's loss to Duke, North Carolina had a really fantastic win, especially a team last year that couldn't stop anybody, looked pretty fierce on defense the other night.
I think, no doubt. I think Clemson, you're seeing what could be the making of the end of their dynasty because Dabo Sweeney just doesn't believe in the transfer portal. I think it can really is as simple as that. You saw just dudes running all over the field. When I think about Florida State, that were guys that were not recruited to Florida State, that they have brought in via the portal. And that team is totally different in a short period of time. And you saw how dynamic they looked against LSU and what a difference that made. Where on the other side, Duke was the better team against Clemson. That wasn't like it was just a bunch of fluky plays. I thought the better quarterback was on the side of Duke. I thought some of the skill position players, which is shocking to say that, but Duke just looked like the more athletic team in some aspects of that game, which is you never would have said that ever in the history of Duke football compared to Clemson, especially in the last decade. The last piece, you mentioned North Carolina. I was so impressed with them up front against South Carolina. And that's been, since Mac Brown's been back in Chapel Hill, one of the things that we've been most critical of with North Carolina is that they just haven't been that physical. But, man, they were dominant up against South Carolina and just how they got after, especially on the defensive line, got after Spencer Rattler and the number of sacks and tackles for losses. South Carolina, including sack yardage, was negative in rush yardage for the game. So I think the ACC, you're definitely seeing the tide shift. And Florida State, absolutely, I think they deserve to be in playoff contention, and they will be there all year, in my opinion, as a team that really should be a favorite out of the ACC.
What were your first impressions of the Bobby Petrino, Connor Wegman, Jimbo Fisher, offensive look that the Aggies showed last week?
A lot better than what we saw last year. And I know it was against New Mexico, but look, when you play teams that you're supposed to beat by several touchdowns, you need to do that. And I know you just asked me about A&M, and I'm going to give you a partial answer with Texas. I thought that was what was disappointing with Texas, was they didn't do that in the first half against Rice. And that's a team that they were favored clearly in a way that they should have put more out there on the offensive side of the ball that they didn't. But I thought A&M did. I thought it looked like a much more cohesive offense that also has the ability to go get explosive plays, which is what was missing from that unit last year. If you remember, they opened with Sam Houston State to open the season last year and really was a flat performance. And I thought that was a concerning sign in 2022 that came to fruition through the course of the season. They struggled on offense all year. To me, it was a good first step. And now they've got a chance to really go prove it on the road against Miami, their road favorites. And if they go win, especially if they do it by a couple scores at Miami, now all of a sudden, as an Aggie fan, you feel like, okay, now you could buy into the hype a little bit, and you've got an offense that isn't going to be holding you back.
Taylor, McHargue again with ESPN with us on 365 Sports.
So how big is the battle for the Bayou Bucket in your estimation?
Man, I think it's huge for Rice because I was about to say we, and I'm not supposed to do that, but Rice hasn't won. I know, you almost got me, but Rice hasn't won that game since 2010. I was still playing football when we won it the last time, and I didn't play in that game, but it's been a long time. And Houston got a big win against UTSA last week, but they, in my opinion, I don't think they were the better team. They created 3 turnovers in the third quarter, and I thought that was the difference in the game. This is the 6th season for Mike Bloomgren at Rice. And they feel like they're finally in a position with the amount of talent they have on the team that they can turn the corner. First year in the American Conference, have the first winning season since 2014. And this would go a long way to prove to Rice fans that all those things are actually true. Even if it's a close loss, I think it still proves that they're going in the right direction and could have a good season in the American. But, man, it would be really disappointing for Rice if they come out and they don't not only win, but if they were to lose by multiple scores and it feels like a blowout, then it feels like, similar Rice teams that we've seen for the last several years. But I do think it's still important. Dana, we had this game last year, and Dana talked about how for Houston, that trophy sits outside of his office, and he reminds his players during Rice Week that they absolutely need to win this game and that this still matters, even though they've dominated the rivalry for quite a while now.
Have a great broadcast, Taylor, and thank you very much for the time when you give it to us on Thursdays. Taylor McHargue, ESPN, Thursdays here on 365 Sports. We've got kind of a